And we are live. Yonatan Nir, thank you for coming. So awesome to see you, mate. Thank you for coming here.
Thank you for inviting me, Asher.
This is the first time we're meeting, actually. I'm actually kind of excited.
Yeah, I heard a lot about you. I read a lot about you, and then we meet finally. So
only bad things, I hope.
Only good things. Only good things.
So people are going to check out this podcast. This is the second episode, which I'm super excited about. They're going to read about you if they do on the blog post. But for people at home maybe seeing this through a different channel, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Who you are? What do you do?
Yeah. My name is Yonatan Nir, and I'm a filmmaker. I'm a documentary filmmaker. I'm producing, directing, sometimes doing cinematography. I started as a photojournalist, and I did that for a couple of years, and then I moved to moving pictures, to filmmaking.
So you basically, when you got into photography, your first steps were being a journalist photographer.
I didn't really plan to become a filmmaker or photographer. I just went traveling after a pretty long military service in Israel. And I started traveling around the world, and I combined it with working in the United States. I had a business there.
Oh, really?
So half a year I worked in my business and ran it, and the other half a year I was traveling around the world, working as a diving instructor in different places. And at some point I felt kind of sad when I moved from place to place and meet people and cultures, and knowing that I'll never meet them again because I move on, And then I find out that there is this little thing called camera, you can just capture the moment and carry it with you, and creating memories, creating stories, and it changed my life. So I started then to write and to photograph, and later on I went to study filmmaking and moved to cinema, basically.
Well, it's actually pretty awesome because I've talked to a lot of my friends from Israel who, it's like a thing, right? Once you finish the army, once you do your 3 years of service, you basically fly as far as you can, right? You take a couple months off, sometimes even years. And it seems like a very interesting thing that most photographers from Israel that I met started dealing with photography as they started traveling. And what, if I understand correctly from you, what you say is that the camera came to you as a memory keeper in a way. Like you use it in a way to have visual memories from the places you've been.
Yeah, memory keeper, but also a way to communicate with people, and a way to, to when you go to a place and you just experience, that's great. And sometimes it's very important to do it even when you have a camera, to put it aside and just let you immerse yourself into the situation and into the experience. But a camera is also a great way to communicate with people. I mean, you go to a place, you meet a different culture, and you have a motivator for them to speak with you, to communicate with you, to show you what they have in their village, to take you to see their rituals, and it's just a great tool for communication, for creating something. It makes everything more interesting for me when I have a camera.
Well, I absolutely agree. I remember, I think I said in the last podcast as well, but there's a good photographer I really, really appreciate called Timothy Allen. And I remember he said something very interesting about photography where, in any other scenario, you come to somebody's home, somebody you don't know at all, you knock on this door and you go like, hey, can I look around and check out your living room? They'll go like, well, what's wrong with you? Why do you want to do that? But if you do it with a camera on your shoulder, it's like usually, come back in. Let me show you around.
Yeah.
And I absolutely agree. I think it's an amazing tool to talk to people, to even have some sort of a conversation with people you don't know their language, right? Because just from the request of, may I take your photo, which is somewhat of a sign language sign even, you can get to someone's house. You can spend a day with somebody you don't have a language, but you both know kind of what is the social activity you're doing together.
Yeah, and what you're actually doing with a camera as a filmmaker or as a photographer is you're actually helping other people tell their own stories. And and it's really interesting because you go to remote places, to people that never seen a camera or that never had anyone else tell their story, and it allows them to think what they want to share with you, what they don't want to share with you, how they want to share it with you. And I just find it a great way to communicate and to create something together with other people.
And it's actually interesting. I didn't know that about you. I thought you started from filmmaking from the get-go, but what you're saying now is that you started actually as a journalist and then a documentary photographer, and then made the transition into filmmaking.
I started as a traveler with a small camera.
With a small pocket camera.
And then people told me, oh, that's not bad. And then I started to write and to photograph for magazines and internationally, in of course in Israel. And I did that for a couple of years. And I, traveled around the world I traveled to many places around the world. And at some point I said, okay, I just want to take it to a different level, where I can also add not only still photography, but also music and dialogues. And I think filmmaking is more about the process and less about capturing a single moment. And it, in a way, fits better to my personality.
So in a sense, what you're saying is that your transition into cinema or videography came from your desire to mix different types of medias. So if it was sound or motion or maybe a long-term documentation of a person or a story. Where did that thought came to your head? When was the part in your traveling, if I understand it correctly, that you encountered a situation where that desire hit you? When you said maybe photography is not enough, stills photography is not enough, what I want to do.
Well, I think that first of all, when I moved from photography to filmmaking, it was a big move. It was not like today when you have this camera or wherever you have another camera that can do stills and video. And in my time, 2005, 2006, when I made this change, it was a big change. It was different equipment.
Were you guys still shooting film at the time?
No, I didn't.
I think it was digital, right?
I started digital. And after a couple of years, I moved to video. But because I liked writing a lot and I liked photographing a lot, and I didn't know what I like more, so it was obvious to me that I'm not doing exactly what I need to do. And then I just saw a couple of documentaries that blew my mind, and I said, "Whoa, that's unbelievable!" Just emotionally, I felt very, very connected. And there was another thing I have to say. And it was the fact that I found out that when I work as a photographer or photojournalist, I'm lonely. I work alone in harsh conditions in very remote places. And when I finally communicate my experience to other people, it's 3 or 4 months later when I write the article and I get many, many good feedbacks on the internet, blah, 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 but I don't experience together with other people. I just share the experiences later with other people. And then I said, wow, I want to work with other people. And there was one moment when I realized that I want to become a filmmaker. And it was when I worked in the Bougainville Islands, which is next to the Solomon Islands, Papua New Guinea.
Next to Papua New Guinea, yeah. It's funny, like when you say any type of island, and if you say Papua New Guinea, people understand where it is, even though it's like a whole different area.
Yeah, but Bougainville is like I think the eastern part of the eastern island of Papua New Guinea. It's right on the border with the Solomon Islands. And I went there because I wanted to visit the place and to write an article for an Israeli magazine and for, I think, Asian Geographic, or maybe for Asian Geographic I was writing on another article for another part of Papua New Guinea. And I got to this island, Bougainville, and they had a big civil war a couple of years before that, so there were no tourists on the island whatsoever.
Trying to stay away from danger as much as possible.
And I was interested by that. I really wanted to write the story of the island and how they had this civil war and what were the reasons for that. And I went there. I landed in the airport, and the people there are very dark skinned, and I'm very you return light in the dark, yeah? Exactly.
You shine in the dark.
So I felt very, very, very different at the airport, and suddenly at the edge, the other part of the hall in the airport, I see these 3 white heads, and I just go to them, and I'm like, "Hey guys, how are you?" And it ended up to be a production company, 3 guys with 17 Pelican cases.
Oh, you encountered an actual cinema crew.
Actual cinema crew.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, wow, it was, I looked at all this equipment and I said, wow, that's amazing, And I came to one of the guys and I asked them, what do I have to do in order to become like you? And he looked at me with this cynical eye and he told me, you need $1 million.
Oh, that's why. What was he? Was he the?
He was the producer.
He was the producer. Of
Yeah,
that.
you
Yeah.
should
That
never-
sounds like a producer answer to me, though.
Yeah, and then I was, just sitting on the side, relaxing with myself, a bit disappointed. And then the director came to me and he told me one very important sentence. He said, "Don't listen to him. You don't need $1 million. All you need is to be persistent and to continue to do what you love to do." And this is actually, that was one of the moments, along my career when I knew that I'm on the right path and that I just need to continue to do that. And in the end, I'll find a way to make it happen.
Well, that's success through grit, right? That's just keep going at it every day, day in, day in, day out, until you make it. And if I remember correctly, when we first talked, I think I gave you a call a couple of weeks ago, trying to bring you over here, and I was absolutely ecstatic when you actually returned my message.
Yeah.
And I think we talked, and you just came back from a series of presentations of your movies.
Yeah.
And we talked even now about how passionate you are about storytelling, and it seems that your entire work always revolves around telling someone's story, helping somebody get their story out. And you actually do that not only through your movies or images or articles, you also do it through the actual products themselves. You showcase your work in schools, in venues. How does that relate? Because you said before about how when you work as a documentary photographer, and I'm sure it's the same when you do videography as well, where once you work on the actual story, you are alone. You're isolated from the rest of the world. You're absolutely invested in one culture, in one village, in one house even. And then when you get the opportunity to go out with a finished product, with an actual movie and show it to people, what's your favorite part? What's the most important experience you gain from it?
Mm-hmm. Well, for me, I'll start with saying that I don't make films because I'm an artist. I'm a storyteller, and I believe that stories has the power to change. So I use stories as a tool. Okay, so at every film that I'm making, I first of all ask myself the question why. Why is that so important for me to tell the story? And I think one of the mistakes that younger filmmakers that come to me to ask for advices and so on make is that they deal a lot with the questions, what do I want to do and how do I want to do it? So they go to the technical or to the results before they understand what is their inner motivation. Okay, so what I do is I call it, it's a process that I developed throughout the years. I call it to go back to your heart. So at any given moment, even today, after 5 or 6 films that I've done and success and whatever, I continue to go back to my heart and to try to find what is my inner motivation. What was the thing that really drive me to do that? Because when you make films, I complete now a film that took me 10 years.
10 years of work.
10 years of work. I started to work on it in 2009. And I mean, the first footage is from 2009. It's a very complicated project. It involves diving with polar bears in the Canadian high Arctic. And it's something that was never done before. It was very complicated to produce it and to make it happen. But I had so many problems on the way, and so many doubts, and so many fears, and so many moments when I thought that it's about, I need to give up. And so many people told me to give up. So the only way to deal with all these things is to go back to your heart and to ask yourself, why do you really need to tell this story? And why is it you that need to tell this story?
What drives you to it?
Yeah, why is it so important to you? Because if you don't do that, you will not find the energy to continue. And actually, when you really know why you want to do things, it's also make it easier to raise money, to fund. I mean, productions are expensive, and when you know why you really want to do it, other people, they feel it. They feel that this thing needs to be done, and they want to become a part of it.
You say it actually touches people who see your work when you're honest, right? When it's your work, when it's something you want to do, and you don't do it because you have the budget or because you think it's going to sell. You do something because it talks to you.
Exactly.
I can't agree more. I mean, recently I sent, it's funny you said that the movie you're working now is from 2009, because I started photography in 2009. And not too long ago, I made a list. I shared it of top 10 advices that I wish I knew when I first started. And I finished it with exactly what you said. And I said that you got into photography for a reason. So when you got into photography, based on your story so far, is that you just want to have some sort of a memory of the places you went to. And then later it developed into storytelling. And I really, really think that a lot of photographers go into photography because they want a hobby. They want a new way to look at the world. They want to tell a story. They have a reason. But it's so easy in the way that this business works, the way, you learn photography through courses or whatever, to forget about why you started photography, why you enjoy it, and focus on the technical aspect. To say like, oh, that's a beautiful image, I need to make it, or I have to travel to this part of the world because I can make these really cool portraits. And if you ask them why, they can't answer. They go, well, it's because it's good image. Yeah, but why is that important to you?
Yeah, but I mean, it depends what kind of photography. I mean, some people, they do photography which is more, technical, and it's amazing. I mean, some people create, macro photography needs to be technical. When you work with really small animals, you have to be technical. Otherwise,
super technical.
Yeah, it's super technical. Or if you shoot whatever the sky in the night, it needs to be technical. So it's like, what I do, because it's very long-term projects, and because it's very risky. Many times you're dealing with a lot of uncertainty. You really don't know what will happen. When you go to the Canadian high Arctic, you're looking for a polar bear, and you want one videographer and one photographer to enter the water with these polar bears. You have no idea if you'll find the polar bear, if you'll find the right polar bear, if they'll be able to get into the water with them, will they attack them or not? And you need to have a lot of work on your own, inner self, like doubts and fears and ego and all this stuff that we're dealing with as photographers and as filmmakers, before you think about the technical aspect. Now, when you always need to be covered technically, you always have to know what you want to do, but you have to have this understanding that you don't have full control, especially when you work in nature.
Well, most definitely, especially if you work in nature with a polar bear underwater, or that sounds pretty hectic. But exactly my point is that I don't say you shouldn't know the technical aspects of photography. If anything, you have to know them. There's a beautiful saying by, I think, Michelangelo, where he says, I saw an angel in the stone and carved to set it free, meaning that he already saw the angel in the pot of stone. He didn't have to carve it out. The carving part, the technical part of it was for the viewers. But I absolutely think that a lot of times photographers don't do it in the right balance. They don't do 50%, 60%, 40% of the technical aspects, how to make the best possible movie, how to make the best possible image or visual for your story, and then also have the other 50, 60, 40% of spirituality to it, right? Why is this important for me? Why do I want to do this movie? And I think from this kind of attitude to combine both the technical aspect and the artistic aspect of why is this important to me? Why am I working on this? This is how you make something special.
Yeah.
The best images come from it. The best movies comes out of it. And I think if you talk about the meme of it, the Michael Bay movies of explosions and cars, they are awesome.
Yeah.
But they tend to lack on a meaning. They tend to lack of going out of the cinema not only with entertainment.
Well, I can only talk about what drives me. I don't want to speak about other photographers, and some people really, really are driven by just beauty, by technical things. Some people are driven by that, and that's totally fine.
Oh, for sure. Nobody's judging this. I'm just saying as a way to grow.
Yeah, I mean, one of the sentences that I really like, and I don't know if I quote it right, but it's a sentence by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and he said once that life is not what one lived, but what one remembered in order to recount it, in order to tell it. So I really believe that one of the things that the camera allows us to do is to reframe our own life, reframe story, to look at the reality, which is endless and hectic and good and bad, and everything is there in reality, and try to find how do we want to reframe it? How do we want to tell a story? And I think this is a very, very powerful tool. And what I try to do in all my films, in Dolphin Boy, and in Picture of His Life, in Cutting the Pain, in The Essential Link, in My Hero Brother, is to usually take stories which are not very simple, people that didn't get the best cards,
weren't dealt the best hands.
Yeah, exactly. And they try, and they tell their story. They're not afraid to get out there and tell their story and show their vulnerability and show how from the pain and from what they've been through they can create amazing things. That's my choice, my choice is to try to point my camera to this kind of stories, because I believe that we need this kind of stories. And another theme that goes throughout all my films is the connection between man and nature, which is super interesting for me. It brought a lot out of me, a lot of emotions and a lot of feelings and thoughts, and I want to share it with more people.
Well, that's just beautiful, man. You know what? Let me ask you the impossible question.
Yeah.
I heard this question so many times, and I know there is no answer because there's no one story. But throughout my travels, wherever I went, if it was Mongolia, Ethiopia, South America, it doesn't matter. There are a lot of experiences, just like you said, who affected us, right? That you remember to change the way you looked at the world, the way you looked at the art, at photography, or the way you looked on relationships. Out of your experiences, and you also mentioned all of the movies you made, which are beautiful movies, and I absolutely encourage everybody listening to this podcast, as soon as they finish this podcast, to go ahead and check it out. We're probably going to put some sort of links at the bottom of the blog. But out of all of these amazing projects you did, is there a story, an experience from them that, I wouldn't say the best or the most important experience you had, but an experience that you think is important for people to know about? An experience that you did as a photographer while working on a movie or a project that you remember to this day, the same way as you told about, when you first got into videography, the story from Papua you just told. Is there anything that happened to you, a personal experience that made a mark on you, that you think somebody should hear?
So many experiences like that, and it's usually connected to nature, I have to say. It could be a dolphin that was jumping in the sunrise, and I remember it until today. And it just, it was a sunrise when I worked on a boat in the Similan Islands, and the sun was rising. It was right after the tsunami, which was very an important time in my life, because the day of the tsunami I was not there, but I came back right after the tsunami.
Well, for people at home who don't really know what we're talking about, can you give us a little background for them to have some sort of context while we're talking?
Tsunami? Do I need to give a bell?
No, which tsunami was it? I mean,
the tsunami that hit Indonesia and Thailand. During that time, I worked as Indonesia, Thailand, many other places around the world. But during that time, I worked as a diving instructor and as an underwater photographer in the Similan Island on a boat called Aladdin Dive Safari. And with good friends from Germany and other places around the world. And I worked as a diving instructor and a photographer. And the day before the tsunami came, my grandfather was very sick. And my father told me, if you want to meet him, you should come to Israel. So I bought the first flight ticket. And it was the day before the tsunami. I landed in Israel, and I went to visit him. He was very, very sick. My grandfather was 90-something years old. And a day later in the morning, I opened the internet, and I saw that there was a big tsunami. At the beginning, they talk about an earthquake with thousands or hundreds of people that died in Indonesia and Thailand. And a couple of hours later, something new came to our life, which is called tsunami, and it was a huge wave that at the end killed I think around 200,000 people.
Wow.
And the boat that I worked on and I knew that because I knew what their route at that specific morning, they were just right where the tsunami passed. So I tried to call them and call them and call them and call them and call them. No one answered for 48 hours. And then I really felt bad because I thought fuck, I just escaped my death. And all my friends are on this boat and they're all dead.
Oh,
and
that's probably been an absolute mind boggler, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was terrible.
That doesn't sound fun to anybody to have to experience something like that.
Yeah.
First of all, saying I could have been there, and then, oh shit, my
was
friends
saved.
are there.
Yeah, I was saved. And then after 48 hours, a friend of mine who lives today in Tasmania, an Israeli guy, he came to me and he said, "Are you sure that they're dead?" And I said, "I'm not." And he said, "No." First I said, "Of course I'm sure, I said, of course I'm sure. I know that. I mean, there were on the boat in the middle of the tsunami, there are dozens of thousands of people dead. They're not answering my phones for 48 hours. They're fucking dead, you know.
Oh, wow.
And then he told me, don't give up until you hear until you hear it, you know, with your own ears. And then I called, and then they answered. And it's a long story, but they were in the middle of the tsunami, but they were deep enough, so they just went on the wave. Or first it was wow, I forgot the Sheffel.
Well, it's actually funny. I don't know the word for it either. I think it's a low. I think it's called a low.
First there was a low
where the
tide.
water goes down.
Yeah, the water went down,
up,
and then the water went up again. But they were all saved. And then I came back to Thailand after the tsunami and helped them with the diving club that they had, and just spent a couple of months on the sea after the tsunami in Thailand. That was one of the most important times of my life, when you are living on the ocean, which you know that a month or two ago killed 200,000 people. And you become very, very connected to their rituals, because every time you go out to the ocean, you can't be cynical. You know, when you know what you can't be cynical
about, know what it can do.
About the beliefs of anyone who believes in whatever. After you know what happened there a month or two before that. One of the most amazing moments that I had there is there were manta rays that pretty much disappeared a month or two before the tsunami, and they never showed up a month or two after the tsunami. So, because we used to see a lot of mantas there, but before the tsunami, they just disappeared. We couldn't see them. And after the tsunami, they didn't come back. We couldn't see them for a month or two. And the moment where I saw the first manta after the tsunami was one of the strongest moments of my life. I didn't even have a camera, but I was crying. You know, it was so beautiful. And she came to us, and she, that was an amazing connection to nature. And this kind of connection I sometimes feel when I shoot in the Himalayas, when I shoot in the Canadian Arctic, when I shoot in the desert. This kind of connection with something which is much greater than us. And if I'm able to bring this feeling through a picture or through a frame, then it's, that's a goal. It's the highest goal, to make people feel what you feel in this kind of moments.
Yeah,
I don't know if I answer your question, but that's what came to my hand. I don't know.
Oh, you actually absolutely did answer the question, and it sounds like a very powerful story, which sounds almost magical to tell, is it? Because a lot of things we want to tell, a lot of the stories we find or we meet or experience, many times words seem to be not enough.
Yeah.
Right, to explain what it means. I mean, what you said about the manta rays disappearing before and returning kind of feels like, the returns of life. The pigeon of life coming back to the sheep.
It's the fear. It's all about the fear. This inner fight that we have within ourselves between between fear and hope, between hate and love, between these elements that we all have inside ourselves. And they come and they express themselves through nature. And sometimes when you're down, really down, then they come and they help you. They lift you up. The worst moments, the moment that you lose hope, this is the moment that something from nature will come and in my experience, and will give you a little bit more energy and power to go through that,
just lift you up when you're down. And,
exactly.
And it's funny because it almost feels spiritual, isn't it? It sounds like the hand of God reaching down, and
it's totally spiritual. I mean, there's so many things that are happening around us in nature that we're less aware of because we're so connected to other things like screens and cameras and all this shit, but in the end, those should be only tools for us to communicate something deeper and higher, I think.
Well, it's interesting you said that, because it's a thought I still have for the past few years. And it seems that these kind of stories, these kind of symbols, tend to happen quite often to storytellers. Whether those be painters or writers or photographers, it seems that quite often we can find those symbolic stories that happened to us, and then how we got lifted.
Yeah, it's like when when you're trying to buy a new car. Sorry for this example.
Yeah, sure.
And you think, oh, I might try to buy a Toyota, whatever, Corolla. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, should I? It's in there.
Yeah, we're not sponsored by a car, but if you guys want to sponsor us, we're absolutely fine. But yeah, sure.
Yeah, but anyways, you want to buy a specific car, then you drive the street and you start to see these cars. You see them. Oh, that's exactly. They're all there. They are there all the time. But you're aware of them because you're looking for that. So I think that storytellers and photographers, they're looking for stories, and they're looking for beauty, and they're looking for connection with their subjects, which are either human beings, butterflies, flowers, landscapes, whatever it is. So when you are photographing, and even if you're an amateur, and it's not your profession, but you have a camera either in your hands or in your mind, you keep looking for that moment, for the decisive moment, for the beauty, for the hope, or maybe for other things. Some people, they look in their photography to show the very negative things that are happening in our world, and that's extremely important too, and then they see it more. And so when you have a camera, when you are a storyteller, you will find more and more moments like that in your own life.
Well, yeah, I absolutely agree. It's exactly where I was going with this, where it feels like when you're more aware of what's around you, you notice it. And, that's one of the things that I think... So as a kid, I was horrible at school. I was allergic to classrooms. And but I remember that as long as we had art studies at the classroom and at school, then I really enjoyed it. The second that art became, 1 hour a week or non-existent, I kind of lost interest. And based on what you just said, and I think we're both on the same line on this is, I think, a beautiful example of how having some sort of art or an artistic desire to tell a story really can benefit and lift your life.
Yeah.
Because when you're aware of these moments, even if they are only existing in your head, they're absolutely powerful, are they? It's a great way to get out of depression. It's a great way to enjoy whatever is in front of you and not being focused on, what's wrong here, what's the practical thing to do, and kind of do see the symbols in life, to enjoy them, even though it's on your head again.
Yeah, it's going back to what we said before, it's the why, because if you're dealing with how am I going to do it and what exactly am I going to do it, you're missing the point. The point is, why do you want to do it? And the why gives a meaning to what you do. So if you have art, if you have a camera in your hand, or if you're a painter or whatever, or if you like music, there is something that lifts you up above this day-to-day life, and that doesn't really have a meaning in the end of the day. And I think when you're creating something, not only enjoying listening to music, or not only enjoying watching films or looking at photos, when you're creating, you basically say something. You say that you can make a change.
Yeah. I mean, we said it before as well, when we came about why you got into photography, what's the reason? And we talked about technicality versus what you want to say, or the spirituality of it, or the artistic part. A lot of time it's a hobby, right? It's just another way to cheer yourself up. Just another way to make a friend.
Which is great.
And I think that's exactly what we're saying here, where, let's put it this way. You've done a lot of documentary work. And you've seen this, I'm sure you did, where photographers travel all across the world in photography groups or expedition or by themselves. And instead of making friends with the people they meet, they are absolutely obsessed with the portrait. They're absolutely obsessed with getting that image and having something to show their friends later. But when you ask them of why they do documentary photography or travel photography, their answer is usually, oh, I just want to explore cultures and see the world. Mm-hmm. But they end up isolating themselves through photography. And I think if anybody's listening to this right now, one of the biggest takeaway to take from these stories is that a lot of times, if you are just attentive to things that happen to you when you do photography, when you use this lens as a way to look at the world, usually happen, and they don't have to end up being a photo. They can be an outcome of a journey, an outcome of a process. Mm-hmm. And that's just awesome. And I think it actually relates to one of your movies And how we say it called in English? My brother is a hero.
My hero brother.
My hero brother.
Yeah.
Which is a beautiful movie. Would you mind telling us a little bit about the movie itself and the process of it?
Yeah, My Hero Brother is about a group of young Israelis that are going on a demanding trek with their brothers and sisters that has Down syndrome, and the trek is in the Himalayas. And it was it's a beautiful project which started with two guys, Itamar Peleg and Enosh Kassel. Itamar Peleg is a tour guide. He has a travel company, and Enosh Kassel has a brother with Down syndrome. And Enosh decided to take his own brother on a trip in the Himalayas just to let him experience what many of us can experience, which is this connection to nature and traveling, and just to get closer to his brother that has Down syndrome. And then when he came back, he had a camera with him, and they made a small but very, very touching piece on it on the Israeli TV, like a report, 5 minutes or so. And it was really touching. I watched it, and many other people watched it as well. And many of them had brothers and sisters with Down syndrome. So then they contacted Enosh and Itamar, his friend, and they basically said, we want to go on a trip like that with our own special brothers and sisters. So these guys, Enosh and Itamar, they basically created this group. They called it My Hero Brother. Voluntarily, they raised funds for this trip, and they went on a trip in India for 2 weeks. And I went with them with my team. The first time I met the guys with the Down syndromes and the girls, of course, it was really a moment that I think echoed into the film. And I'll tell you about this moment if you don't mind.
Please do. That sounds awesome.
They were doing some trainings in Israel 2 or 3 weeks or maybe a month before they went to the Himalayas, because they needed to check that they can climb to 3,500 meters. And I went there to meet them when they were going through these physical checks, exams. And I enter a room, and there was like 6 or 7 people with Down syndrome sitting in front of me. I don't know them. And I come to them to shake their hand, but they don't shake my hand. They come and they give me this big hug, and they hug me and they hug me and they hug me and they hug me for like 25 seconds. And another guy is hugging me from the other side, and another girl is hugging me, and they tell me how cute I am and how happy they are to see me, and they don't even know me. And that at that moment, I realized that, our perception on these people as people with special needs, okay, is maybe wrong, because they do have special needs, but they also have special qualities and abilities that we all should learn from. And that moment, I said, I fell in love. I said, I have to go with them. And we went with them for 2 weeks in the Himalayas, and it was very, very, very beautiful, because except of the beautiful landscape and the beautiful people, the Indian people, you see the relationship between the brothers in families with special needs, and they really opened up and told their very personal stories. And as they were climbing the mountain to try to reach the summit, many things came out. And slowly, also the people with Down syndrome, they start, when you watch the film, and I think you can even watch it if you in the United States, at least you can watch it on Amazon and whatever other places you can look for it. And slowly we get to know the people with Down syndrome and how they think and how they see the world from a different perspective. And it was one of the only times in my life that I was, sitting behind the camera, and I was laughing and crying at the same time, because they bring out so many emotions, and they really reminds you that because they don't think through the brain, they think through the heart. And when you are spending time with them, they allow you to become a bit like that too. They allow you to get closer to the child that all of us have inside of us, deep inside. And as the years pass, we become more serious, and we have more masks,
a different mask,
and we have more filters, and we think twice before we say something or we do something. They don't. They tell you exactly what they feel, and they, in a way, they're the best photographers, because they are in the moment all the time. So they capture the moment to its full extent, or whatever, how you say it. It was just an amazing experience to film it. The film had an unbelievable success worldwide. It was, translated to 8 different languages, including Chinese, and it was screened in, I think, 30 or 40 different countries. And I screen it all the time around the world.
It's absolutely interesting. You're sitting now talking about this, and you actually get emotional. I've seen so many photographers talk about their project as if, saying how awesome they are, how cool they are.
Yeah, but it's not about my film, because I when we got an award for this, 2 awards in the Santa Barbara International Film Festival for this film. And it's the first time in this festival that they gave the 2 main awards to the same film with 32 years. And I was so amazed when they called me to stay on stage to get the awards. I was not ready and I was surprised. So the only thing that I could say is, I want to thank the team that worked with me, and I want to thank the protagonists of my film because they allowed me to tell their story. And the only thing I really had to do was not to disturb.
Not to be in the way.
Not to be in the way. Just to bring this beauty without touching it too much, without manipulating it too much, without getting through my story, And it was funny because the head of jury was Arthur Schmidt, who I didn't know at that time, but he gave me the awards. And then he said to me, that's exactly what I told Robert Zemeckis when I was editing Forrest Gump. And I think that when you work with people with special needs, it pushes you to get closer to who you are and to be more honest with yourself, because otherwise they don't get it. They don't react so well to manipulations and stuff like that. So you need to be honest when you work with this kind of people, and you need to not to disturb, just to be kind of something that the story is coming through you to the audience. It's not like you're creating it so much as if you just let it pass through you to the audience.
Let it shine.
Yeah.
But it's absolutely amazing because I do teach a lot, documentary photography and travel photography, and one of the biggest struggles I see students have is that they don't know what to say. They come to somebody and they don't know what to tell them. They want to take their photos, they want to tell their story, but they're like, how do I convince them? How do I make them agree? And my advice is exactly what you said, which is absolutely beautiful. Just be honest. Say you're interested.
Yeah.
Say, I usually, when I come to photograph a culture, I'm currently working on a book, so I do it quite often. And I go there, and the second I meet the person I want to photograph, I literally go, you are awesome. You are the most photogenic person I met so far. You have an interesting story. I want to tell your story. Would that be fine by you? And people are amazed just how often people would say yes to them.
Yeah.
And how effective it is to be honest with another person. A lot of photographers feel, and I've seen it a lot, they need to find a way to lie about it, right? To say, I'm a National Geographic photographer, I'll make you famous. But when you're actually honest, the same way you just described it, that seems like the best way to use photography. Well, even if you're not a photographer, right? Even if you do it with your smartphone.
Yeah.
To come to a person and say, dude, you look awesome.
Yeah.
May I take your portrait?
Yeah.
And that actually is an honest connection between people. And I think when you do that, you get to a point where the final movie, the final image are not important anymore because you made an honest connection with the person you were interested in.
Yeah.
And when you were talking about the movie, and I was actually,
is less pressure because it's about the communication. It's not about the photo.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Of course. When it comes from an honest place, when it comes from yourself, and I think we keep going to the same point again, which I found beautiful because it's the grit of actually going ahead and doing it, the honesty of both understanding why you want to do it, why you like it, and then using that to make something interesting and true. And I don't know, it's very relaxing, very reassuring, I would say, to see somebody in your level actually following through with it and is not that hasn't become cynical about making movies. It hasn't become cynical about selling emotions.
Yeah.
And I think that's just amazing to see.
It's very complicated because, when you're working in the industry and when you're running big productions with different broadcasters involved, and they care about what will be what their audience will say, and we want to screen it at 8:30 p.m. and I need to have 1 million viewers, otherwise blah blah blah. It's complicated. It's a very, very, very complicated profession. It's documentary filmmaking is you need to have a lot of patience. Not only, I think, when you're shooting, but also when you're communicating with the other people that you work with. You need to understand that you need time. Okay, you can't do things fast, because if you do things fast, it will not give the other people that work with you. I mean, I can come to a person and say, you look great, I want to take a photo of you, and he will say no, because he will not feel great about himself. Okay, so it will take time to build it, and I also suggest to go to people and try to find what their interest. Okay, when I go to a new place, when I tell a story, I want to understand what can bother the person that I work with. I mean, we're working with different cultures. We're working with people from different backgrounds and point of views and beliefs, and people think differently. So you need to spend time. You can't come and just take it and go and publish it.
Yeah, expect everything to be silky smooth. You just come, take your photos.
I mean, you worked years on your project with in Mongolia, I think. Yeah, and it was not something that you came one day and just did it. Sometimes I spend time in a place and I shoot one thing, and then I find out, well, that was good, but maybe I should try to shoot the same thing tomorrow in the sunrise, or
there's a greater depth to explore.
You
when
need
work.
the time to explore within yourself what is that you want to tell, but it's also very, very important to ask the other person. And what I do, which is not very usual, I mean, many other filmmakers are doing that, I always show my films to my protagonists.
As you go, you show them the rough edits.
Before I screen it, I communicate the story to them, and I get this fine tuning, and I show them the cut before I lock it.
I think that's absolutely the best thing to do. I usually do that as well when I photograph. There's a story I told when I did my last TED Talk in Tel Aviv, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And I was telling a story about how I was working in South China in a culture called Miao. Or Hmong. It's an ethnic group living in South China and a bunch of other areas in Asia. And I was working with a silversmith, a very old silversmith. And when we started photographing, I didn't tell him, you look cool, I want to take a photo. I said, I'm doing a photography project on your culture.
Mm.
I want to use you as a face. I want to use you as the ambassador of the Miao silversmiths.
Mm.
And the way the photo shoot went, which I absolutely liked it, I showed him the photos as I was taking them. I took a couple of snaps, chose the one I liked, I showed it to him and asked his opinion. And he actually became an art director of his own photo shoot.
Exactly.
And I think that's a beautiful way to do everything combined. It's a beautiful way to dig deeper and find different layers. It's a great way to learn about the culture and make a friend, right? Because you guys are working together. He's no longer a subject. He's no longer a protagonist, right? He's a person that you're working with and you're happy to do so. And I think if you can do it also in cinema, it's probably making the movies so much better, especially in documentary movies.
Yeah, I mean, few of my documentaries I dealt with post-trauma. Now here, my first film was Dolphin Boy. And, it started as just a I came back from the second Lebanon war, and I was injured in this war. And after my injury, I went back to work with the dolphins in the Dolphin Reef in Eilat. I was a photographer and cinematographer there. And the first time when I entered the water after the war ended, all the dolphins came to me and really gave me a show that they never gave me before. And it's the Dolphin Reef is not it's not a concrete pool. It's in the open ocean. They can go whenever they want to go, but they came to me, 6 or 7 dolphins, and they swam around me, and they made me really, really feel like inside that, wow, life goes on. It was a really beautiful moment for me. And 2 or 3 weeks later, there was this guy that came to the Dolphin Reef, and he was kidnapped and beaten cruelly by classmate. He was bullied basically, and he stopped communicating. He stopped speaking with people. He
Closed down.
Didn't speak with people for 6 months. And for 6 weeks, sorry.
6
And
weeks.
after 5 months, he started to speak again. When he came to the Dolphin Reef, he was not speaking for 6 weeks. But then it took him another 5 months to start to speak again. And when he started to speak again, he created a different identity for himself. He was an Arab kid, an Israeli Arab kid, 17 years old. And when he started to communicate and to speak again, he spoke only Hebrew. And he didn't want to go back home. He didn't want to see his mother. He was escaping his own trauma. So this film, I mean, we work on it for 4.5 years with Danny Menkin, my partner, and with Judith Menassan Ramon, who was the producer. And it ended up to being a pretty big film. It was sold to Disney Pictures. It was all over the world, Arte, Channel 4, whatever. But, you know, it started with a very, very personal thing. I really wanted to tell the story of this boy because I felt on myself, what does it mean to be really depressed and traumatized and go into the water and have dolphins coming to you? So I wanted to tell this story badly, and it took so many years to make it happen, 4.5 years of shooting. And this is one of the things that, you know, the best advices that I can give to people is to try to find stories that you feel connected to. Now, of course, if you're making a story about another culture in another country, you can say there is no connection. I just do it as an anthropologist, blah, blah, blah. This is not my way of thinking. I think that you can find connection to any person. And when you go to Papua New Guinea or to South Africa or to wherever, you should find this connection that you have to the person and to the story that you're telling. And this will give you a lot of energy to go through all the problems that you have on the way, and to go through the challenges that we have when we do photography or cinematography. You have to find the personal connection. You have to understand why it's so important to you.
Man, that's such an awesome way. I mean, we're almost out of time, and it's a beautiful way to finish this conversation. Find your story, find your connection, find why you want to do what you do, and just go at it.
Yeah.
And I just to finish up, when we first had this conversation, when I talked to you about the podcast, we talked about what is the lesson you wished you knew 10 years ago when you first started. Or sorry, for your case, it's slightly longer than 10 years, but as an idea, I think that what you said is an extremely important lesson for anyone who wants to become a creative photographer, director, designer, whatever kind of storytelling you want to do. It's to understand why you're doing this, and then follow up with doing the project or the story or the work that relates to you, that is connected to you. And it's extremely evident to see it in your work. It's even more evident now when I finally got to talk to you, to see how emotionally connected you are to your work. And it's absolutely amazing. And we're going to put some links in the blog post to your work, to videos, images, whatever, selfie or something you want to post. But if people want to check out your work, is there anything you want to recommend them to check out? And also, if you can give us a little share, what are you working on now? Well,
I'm gonna finish very soon the new film that I was making about Amos Nahum, which is one of the greatest photographers, wildlife photographers of our time. And if you want to look at some pictures, you shouldn't look at mine, but you should look at the Amos Nahum's pictures. They are amazing. And I was very lucky to work with him and to also make a film about his life together with my partner, my Dolphin Boy partner, Danny Menkin. So this is a film produced by Nancy Spielberg, Ori Eisen, Mirit Eisen, and some really, really amazing people that we met along the way. About Amos Nahum, his life, his work, and his dream to swim with polar bears and to take a picture of them underwater. So it's a film that will be out probably later this year.
Later 2009, cinema near you.
we see exactly where we're gonna get it out and premiered and all that. I'm working now on a very interesting project as a producer together with Andy Bayat, who made Blue Planet and Planet Earth. The first ones, it is called Game Over Fishing, and it's about I'm producing it. It's about young people, Reggie Domingo and Roy Kimchi and Zeev Girsch, who went to Central America and started to work with sharks in Cocos Island and find out a lot of conspiracies and a lot of things under the surface of the shark finning industry in Central America and basically around the world. And that's a very important film for me because we're practically, killing all the sharks from the oceans. And so that's another film. And I make another film with a great guy named Nadav Ben Yehuda, who's a mountaineer. And I can't talk too much about that film, but that's another big project. And there's other things, smaller things that are going on and maybe developing into something. So,
man, you are over the top packed with work. I mean, even when you got here to this podcast, up to the very last second of us starting filming and recording, you were doing emails, working with people. Thank you so much. I'll take this opportunity to say thank you for taking the time to come here. It's been absolutely a pleasure talking to you, my friend.
Same here, man.
And we should do this again soon. We should do it somehow, maybe another constellation, maybe just grab coffee or do another podcast. I don't know. We should figure it out. Thank you so much for coming, my friend.
I like what you do. Awesome. It's very important, I think, to share. I think in the end of the day, and maybe that's one last thing that I want to say, there are really good people in the industry. And when I started, many people helped me. And don't be afraid to ask for help. I'm not talking about you, because you're already a professional. But if you're starting something and you really want, even where I am today, I continue to ask for help from people. I continue to try, to go to the next level by really using, other people that were in my place a few years ago and now they're somewhere else. So communicate with people, speak with people. You might find out that there are great people around that will want to help you accomplish your dreams.
For sure. Actually, if you're going to add another story, I'll tell one last thing that I think really relates to what you just said. I got my first photography gig in Macau. I was invited by the manager of MGM Macau to do a little talk about my work. And it was way over the top for me. I didn't do any kind of photography work before, and much less lecture. And they did everything. Like, they flew me over, they helped me build a lecture, and we did this little talk. And afterwards, I became really, really emotional. And I sat down with that manager and I said, I'm super young. Thank you. This has been my first job as a photographer to talk about my work. Thank you. I mean, how can I thank you in any other way? And what he said was really awesome. He said, 50 years ago, I was exactly in your shoes.
Yeah.
I was a young kid out of high school. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and someone just took me and gave me a chance. Someone took me and gave me my first job in what I do today. And I owe him. I owe him since then. So now I give it to you. Your job is to pass it forward. Yeah. And if you pass out information or knowledge or an experience or a story, I think it's absolutely amazing. It's a great way, again, to finish this podcast, and a great way to go on today and do something special.
Perfect.
Thank you so much, my friend.
It's
been awesome. It's been awesome.
Thank you.